All right. So those are some really fascinating talks, and I just want to give a little bit of an overview of some of my takeaways from that. But I also want to give a little background on kind of where I come from. So my background's in clinical psychology. My research focuses on more computer vision and machine learning than NLP. But what's always struck me about that work, looking at facial expressions and like depression, for instance, is that I think there's a really important piece missing when you only focus on what someone's face is doing and not really what they're saying. So it's like really different if you smile while you're saying something nice and if you smile while you're saying something kind of nasty. So ideally we'd be able to kind of capture that by going multimodal and kind of combining these things. But that was a big part of why I decided to go over to Carnegie Mellon at the Language Technologies Institute where I am now, so that I can kind of add those NLP tools and some of the acoustic tools to the skills I already had on the vision side. And it's also one of the reasons why I was really excited to come, be invited for this panel to discuss it. So I want to go through 3 of the highlights that I kind of took away from these talks. The first is that I think current assessment practices really rely heavily on patient self-report and on clinician judgment, which can be good, but also can be subjective and prone to some important biases. And also assessment is just difficult, especially when we get into these symptoms like how negative or impoverished or how incoherent a patient's language usage is. Like imagine trying to put a number on that that's going to be meaningful week to week and can kind of track these kind of subtle changes. It's incredibly challenging. And yet, as some of these speakers have been talking about, computer science tools can really actually help us do these things in some really amazing ways. Oh, okay, that's unfortunate timing. Just give me one sec, sorry about that. And sometimes these tools can even reveal new things that we weren't expecting to find, which can improve our predictive accuracy, which can be really useful in a practical sense. But I think another thing that's really interesting about these types of tools is sometimes by revealing new things we weren't expecting, they can actually advance and challenge our clinical theories and kind of push us to understand, some of these phenomenon in really exciting new ways. Second, there's really just a wealth of rich clinical information that I think is currently largely being ignored because it's in this unstructured kind of free text format that most people, most researchers and clinicians don't really know what to do with. And yet with the right tools, we can take this data that's maybe locked up in electronic health records or saved as chat logs, from telemedicine or from, these crisis text lines. And we can do some pretty amazing things with that data. We just, again, need to have the right tools. And I think that's one of the biggest strengths of NLP in particular, even above some of the, the facial stuff that I do. Is that it can kind of take this, again, this free text data, it's kind of like data lead and turn it into data gold. So it's really cool stuff. And then finally, and I found this in my own work as well, is that I think sometimes a categorical DSM diagnosis isn't really the best way to analyze psychopathology. So especially when we're examining these really low-level basic behavioral outputs like language or facial expressions, I think sometimes the more appropriate level of analysis is one of these transdiagnostic dimensions. So whether those come from RDoC or something like the recent HiTOP model or hierarchical taxonomy of psychopathology models, I think we can, again, connect what we're doing within psychiatry to these broader either biological or personality science literatures, and I think the work is really enriched when we're able to do that. So without any further ado, I want to invite the speakers from the panel up, and I have some questions for you, and I'm hoping there'll also be time to open it up to some audience questions as well. So thank you.